Navigating what to eat can feel a bit like walking through a field of hidden threats. One day a food is a staple, the next it's a villain. Gluten, dairy, nightshades, lectins, the list grows, and with it, anxiety can settle around the dinner table. The simple, joyful act of enjoying food becomes a complex calculation of risk. And this isn't just in our heads. This anxiety can often be a response to something very real in our bodies. For many of us, the search for problematic foods begins with real physical suffering. Bloating that's unbearable, pain that's debilitating, fatigue that shapes our days. When we are in that place, grabbing onto a dietary change isn't a trend. It can feel like a lifeline, like a rational attempt to find relief and control in the face of something that feels out of control. But what if the story is more complex and, in that complexity, more hopeful? What if the question isn't just what's the problematic food, but what is the state of the body receiving that food? Emerging science could be pointing to an important distinction, a difference between a direct threat and a contextual trigger. A direct threat is a food that will generally cause a specific, reproducible, immune or metabolic reaction in almost everyone with that condition, like celiac disease or a peanut allergy. The food itself is the primary actor. A contextual trigger is a food that causes symptoms within a specific, vulnerable internal environment. The food itself isn't inherently bad, but it becomes a problem when it interacts with a system that is already primed for distress. Now, this distinction is quite important. It can help us understand when a careful or temporary elimination might be a necessary tool for investigation, like the first stabilized step in the RISE framework we use in this group, and when it might be a reaction driven by worry and fear that could ultimately narrow our nutritional landscape and weaken our resilience. Let's take the example of gluten. This year's review in the Lancet looked at people who don't have celiac disease, but feel unwell after eating gluten. What it found was startling. For the vast majority, when tested in blinded trials, the gluten molecule itself wasn't the trigger. So what was? For many, according to the review, it was other compounds in wheat, like food maps. And according to one of the studies discussed in the review, the symptom severity was primarily linked to participants' expectations rather than actual gluten content. This is known as the nocebo effect. When individuals expect a food will cause discomfort, their brains heighten vigilance and stress, causing both the perception and the gut's response to normal digestive sensations, such as mild distension or gas, to be amplified. Through this gut-brain loop, what might be innocuous in someone else can become genuinely painful or distressing, because the gut itself can become more reactive due to these signals. Importantly, these symptoms are real, with measurable impacts on well-being and quality of life. But in many cases, the underlying mechanism might not necessarily be a reaction to the food's chemical structure, but rather the meaning and expectation assigned to that food, shaped by previous experiences and anxieties. This isn't about it being all in your head. It's about the fact that your head and your gut are in constant, powerful biochemical conversation. When the brain is anxious and hypervigilant, it can instruct the gut to be hypersensitive. We are, in a very real sense, feeling our thoughts and fears in our digestive tract. And this is further amplified by how rapidly shifting food trends, clickbait headlines, and well-meaning advice from health professionals and lay people can turn eating into a source of anxiety rather than nourishment. I have seen glimpses of this in my own life. There have been times when I've read about a food being problematic, and almost on cue, I started to notice a sensation of heaviness or discomfort after eating it. Was the food the sole issue, or had my awareness, my anticipation of the problem also primed my system to interpret what may have been more normal sensations as signals of distress? When we misidentify a contextual trigger as a direct threat, the consequences may ripple out. Nutritionally, we may unnecessarily exclude entire food groups, potentially missing out on the very fibers, vitamins, and minerals that help build a resilient gut and a calmer immune system. Economically, specialty diets carry a significant financial burden, making health a privilege. Socially and psychologically, the fear can isolate us. It can turn shared meals, a fundamental human bond, into a source of stress and alienation. This isn't to create guilt, but to highlight that the strategy of elimination, while sometimes necessary, carries its own weight. So what is the path forward? Especially in the context of trends and not genuine distress, it's a shift in focus. Instead of starting a war on our plates, we could begin a curious conversation with our bodies. The real question shifts from what must I eliminate to what does my body need to feel safer and more resilient? The answer may depend on individual circumstances, preferences, and other factors. This isn't a call to ignore your symptoms or to eat everything blindly. The crucial distinction lies in our starting point. Are we investigating from a place of curious clarity or reacting from a place of preemptive fear? Your body's signals are valid, your pain is real, but interpreting these signals requires curiosity alongside that fear. It asks us to consider not just the food on our fork, but the complex, beautiful, sometimes wounded ecosystem within us that receives it. We would love to hear from you. Have you ever noticed fearing a food made your reaction to it worse? Share your experience below.